Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Well, we were just doing that. Thank you so much for coming out this evening to welcome back our friend Joe Finder. We haven't seen him for a while, so it's very exciting to have him here. Thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. And we are here to talk about the oligarch's daughter. So I think the first question that I'm going to ask Joe is what does oligarch mean? Because it's a word that we're all going to become very familiar with over the next little while.
Yeah, it's a word that people are starting to learn. Hey, Barb. And so oligarch actually means the rule by the few. It doesn't mean rule by the rich, but that's what it now means, is rule by the rich. And
That's because it's hard for a few of the poor to actually gain any traction.
okay, right. So what's interesting is that there are American oligarchs now and there are Russian oligarchs now. The American oligarchs have a great deal of political power. The Russian oligarchs, if they get involved with politics, they tend to fall out windows. So when the oligarchs in Russia actually brought Putin to power, they funded his election, they funded biographies of Putin, they sort of created this nebbish, as we'd say, this nothing of a KGB, of a mid-level KGB officer, and decided that he was going to be the heir to Boris Yeltsin. And so they created him, and then shortly after he came to power, he called the richest men in Russia in for a meeting in the Kremlin. And he told them, you want to keep your fortunes, you want to keep your yachts and your mansions and your private jets, stay in your lane. Keep out of politics. And as long as you keep out of politics, you're okay. And just to prove his point, he had the richest man in Russia arrested, a guy named Khodorkovsky, put on trial and sent to the Gulag for 10 years on grounds of quote-unquote corruption. The other oligarchs got the point. So the oligarchs in the U.S. are much more powerful than the oligarchs in Russia now.
And we may see a Game of Thrones going on with the oligarchs in the U.S., but, we're not quite there yet.
Right.
It's an interesting time, which is a, Chinese curse. It's sort of, may you live in interesting times. Right. But why did you decide to call the book The Oligarch's Daughter? And were you at all hesitant to use the word oligarch in the title?
Yeah, I did. My agent and I thought about that. Does anybody know what the word means? So we hesitated.
Yeah.
And decided to take the chance, and now everybody knows what it means. So it turned out to be okay. It turned out to be the word on everyone's lips.
Yeah, wow. Great cover design, too, I think.
It is a great cover.
This is
cover.
a new publisher for Joe. He has been previously elsewhere, and so I thought that they did a really great job with him with this red cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything to do? I mean, generally authors don't have much to do with the cover design, but was this one where you got to weigh in?
I did weigh in. In fact, my wife was the one who looked at the original cover design, which was sort of pastel, and said, Joe Finder cover is not pastel. The Joe Finder cover is red. And for the oligarch, it's got to be red. So I asked them to make it a red cover. And they did, and they brought in the gold lettering, and the embossing, and the shiny, jacket. So that was Harper doing it, but my wife Michelle was the one who insisted that it be red.
Good for her. I love that.
Yeah.
Right. So Russians in America. If you've read a lot of crime fiction, you know that there's a considerable number of them. That is it Brighton Beach? Where do I remember they are?
Yeah.
In New York.
But that's the old days. The Russians used to live in Brighton Beach. Now they live in Jekyll Island and the Jupiter Island.
Right.
And they live in, these oligarchs live in the fanciest places. I'm sure there are oligarchs around here, too.
Well, there probably are. I know that Belgravia, which is one of the most exclusive, wealthy sections of London, was
Yeah.
largely taken over by oligarchs who were moving their money out
Yeah.
of Russia into, British banks. But that was probably more a before Brexit operation.
Yeah, yeah. So London became Londongrad, as it was called, because of all the Russians who were buying up properties and all the mansions and that kind of thing.
Right. So where's your character? Where's
So
your
mine's
oligarch?
in New York. My guy's in New York. His name is
Okay.
Arkady. Lives in New York, and I should. Can I tell them briefly what the book's about? We
Totally.
forgot to do that.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, it is the story of a regular American guy who marries the daughter of a Russian oligarch without knowing she's the daughter of a Russian oligarch. And then American intelligence takes an interest and comes in and tells him he has to inform on his now father-in-law. And he realizes if he were to inform on his father-in-law, he's screwed if he's ever found out. But if he doesn't, he's screwed. So it's a classic Joe Finder setup where the guy he's trapped.
It's a catch-22 to
Yes.
quote Joseph Heller, isn't it?
Right, Joseph Heller. Yeah. So he's trapped. And eventually he will have to go on the run. And that's the other part of the book. Half the book is a love story, and half the book is a chase novel. And it's in fact when I was writing the book, originally oligarchs were the kind of merchant princes in the U.S. They bought up all the biggest properties, yes. They were philanthropists. They gave generously to museums and hospitals. The Tate has a building named after one oligarch. And then the Russians invaded Ukraine. And I thought, oh man, that's the end of this book. And until I realized it could be actually kind of cool to have two timelines, one before the war and one during the war. So in the one case, we see the oligarchs at the height of their power. And then we see the oligarchs when they are non-persons, pretty much. They've been sanctioned, they're on the run. So that kind of made it a lot more interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I can certainly see that. To a great degree, has their money been frozen?
Well, the thing is, most of the money is in shell corporations
Right.
offshore.
In the Caymans or somewhere.
Yeah, so we have no idea where their money is. So I think most of them are okay.
Yeah. Well, I know we were able to confiscate their yachts or one
we
thing or
seized
another.
their yachts,
but,
yeah.
But that's actually costing more money than anybody ever imagined, is to keep
Yeah.
a yacht without sinking it is an extremely expensive operation.
Very expensive, yeah.
Right.
I knew when I wrote the book there had to be a scene on a yacht. I've actually
Okay.
never been on a yacht. So I tracked down. Have I been on a yacht, Peter? I don't think so. Peter's one of my oldest friends.
Hi, Peter.
I don't think I've been on a yacht per se. So I tracked down the captain of a super yacht, who was a great source, who turned out to be hired by oligarchs to captain their yachts. And he told me all kinds of great details about these yachts and the oligarchs and their passengers and the lobster tanks and the freezers just for ice cream and in the belly of some of these yachts are submarines. So I mean it's just over the top and incredible, but great detail for the book.
Yep, there's I'm going to do a little plug here for a book by Barbara Nicholas, who was here last week, and in her thriller, which takes place in Singapore, It's all about a. You guys were here for that, weren't you? Okay, so it's about a woman whose company are yacht designers, and she gets to Singapore where her sister is in trouble, and when she goes on board the yacht, because she designed the yacht, and she's the only person that would know this, there's a sort of locked room. She
Yeah.
can tell that there's some square footage missing from view
Plan, the
on
general
the yacht.
arrangement.
And
Yeah.
so then the question is why? And if it's a really interesting locked room in a yacht mystery,
That's cool.
but
Why are
it's
you
a-
advertising another book right
because because well, for one,
now? Sorry.
it's all right. It's perfectly okay. Because if you're really interested in yachts, it's like a primer for yacht design
Yeah.
and the excesses of yachts and how they can be used. And I thought about you,
Yeah.
I mean, it just occurred to me when you were doing that. Up until I read her book and Joe's book, I'd never given any real thought to yachts.
Right.
And all those, other than they're a hole in the ocean in which to pour money, which is kind of the
Right.
general description of yachts.
Right.
But I guess I hadn't really been aware of the excess to which they have become and what that would pose to a designer of a yacht.
Yes. Yeah. I was able to use some of the inside information for some of these scenes in the yachts. I actually had a great sequence we had to cut out involving one of the locked rooms in the yachts. I'll use it in another book. I don't like wasting.
Now you're in yachts. I love it. So Joe and I have read Joe's books and we have done events together for many, many years. And Joe has always been a real master of business and finance as powers for his books. Have any of you read early Joe Finders? Okay. And there was, a movie or two based on
Two
all
movies.
that? Yep.
Two movies.
Right. And so it seems to almost anything you write is going to be not necessarily political, but more about finances and
Money.
how money
Money
moves.
and power.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also true in this book. While it sounds like there might be sort of a spy element to it, and there is kind of, basically we're still back in Finder world.
Right. That's right. It's money and power. No, right?
No. No, you could probably never make up anything more interesting than what's currently happening. So lots of fodder for you. But
Yeah.
what is it about money? What was your career before you were an author that brought you, so much? You bring so much of the financial world into your books.
Man, I was a teacher before I was a writer, so there was no money involved.
I thought you were some Wall Street tycoon
So
or
maybe
something.
that's what's that? She gets that. Yeah, yeah. So no, I think I've just been fascinated by money and power. And when I was in college, I was in a singing group, and we would tour a group called the Whiffenpoofs.
Of course it was.
And right,
Is- is-
and we went to Malcolm Forbes's hot air balloon festival in Belleroy, France, which was full of rich people on the hot air balloons, and everywhere we went, it was a great deal of money,
Yeah.
and I was a poor college kid, sort of fascinated by it. It was kind of like with my nose pressed to the window.
Like the little mash girl. Right. Can you sing the Whiffenpoof? I'm not asking you to do it, but the
Of course I
Whiffenpoof
can
song.
sing the Whiffenpoof
I
song.
love it. All right.
Ba ba ba.
So, right. So, what got you into writing?
I wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. When I was 8, I discovered a novel called The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet by a writer named Eleanor Cameron. It was sort of like light sci-fi for kids. And I loved this book. And I got my friends into it as well. We were all reading The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet.
Sorry.
And so I wrote a letter to the author. And in those days, when you wrote a letter to the author, it wasn't like sending an email. It was you would send a letter, it would sit in a pile in the publishers, and eventually they would send it to the author. So a few months later, I got back a letter. It was a form letter from Eleanor Cameron, but it had her home return address on it. So I wrote to her at her home, and I said, "But you haven't answered my questions." And she wrote back a 2-page, single-spaced letter, and we had this kind of correspondence that went on for years. We were sort of pen pals. And to me, this was my first realization that behind a novel was a person, that this was a job you could do. And I thought, I want to do this. I really want to be a writer. And my parents said, no, you really want to be a lawyer. And they were not happy when I decided to become a writer until I sold my first novel, The Moscow Club, and then all of a sudden they were happy with my decision to become a writer.
Well, we're happy that you did that too.
So it's
right.
it's a privilege to get to make stuff up for a living.
Or some of us former lawyers get to sell stuff
Right,
for a
that's
living. Right, I
Right.
know. Other than there
There
are
are plenty- yes, there are a lot of
lawyers.
authors.
There, yep.
Lawyer authors, yeah.
Publish or practice is the slogan for lawyers, right? There was a very good lawyer author for years, a woman named Leah Matera, I think her name was, and that was the slogan she kept over her desk: publish or practice. She preferred publishing to actually practicing law. But, a lot of authors have sort of disappeared. I often wonder sometimes what happens when one of them suddenly stops.
What do they do? What happens to them?
I don't know. I mean, I'm about
They
to
go
write
back
to Arch.
practicing law.
Well, I'm about to write to Archer Mayer, one of my favorite people in
Uh-huh.
series, and ask him, because it's been 2 years now since I've seen a Joe Gunther book, and
Yeah.
not everybody makes an announcement
Mhm.
or retires in public or something, and so I'm always worried when something like that happens.
Yeah, well, in my case, there was a gap between this book and the one before, and I actually wrote another book and was not happy with it, and I put it down. I couldn't figure out how to fix this book. I put it down, and then I had this idea for The Oligarch's Daughter, and this just grabbed me. So I will at some point go back to this this failed book, and I'll fix it. I'm not going to waste it.
Okay.
But The Oligarch just took me over.
Well, it's much better to write a book that you're passionate about and that
Yeah.
actually works.
Yeah, that works.
That's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
very good thing. I remember that I think it was the last book that you published had the most amazing cover. Do y'all remember that? It had this kind of geometric cover design that was was the steps.
That
Was
was,
that-
was
Wasn't
that
maybe not? Maybe it might have been the
was that
penultimate
the
book.
Switch, maybe? I'm not sure.
I'd have to go look, but I
Yeah.
remember how I loved the cover. I thought it was
Yeah.
such a brilliant design.
Yeah, yeah.
So, all right. So let's talk about when he goes on the run.
Yeah.
He's not going on the run in urban New York. Where is he going on the run?
Well, so he gets into trouble and he has to disappear. This is Paul, our hero.
Paul Brightman,
Paul
right?
Brightman. He has
Okay.
to disappear. So how do you disappear these days in the age of CCTV cameras and facial recognition and Google and LinkedIn and all that kind
And
of
giving
thing?
up your phone.
And your phone, yeah, that's right. So I read a number of books with titles like How to Disappear. And I contacted some of the authors, and a lot of them were bogus. One of them was very good, and he told me a number of things. One is, you do not want to disappear into the anonymity of a big city anymore. That doesn't happen because there are too many cameras around.
Okay.
You want to go to a small town that doesn't really have cameras.
Okay.
So I decided on New Hampshire. And I also learned that the worst thing you can do if you're trying to disappear is to fake your own death. Because if you do that, you have the cops on your ass, basically, for years. They will never give up. So if you so if a body is not found. So anyway, the best way to do it, this guy said, is just to walk out the door and disappear, and then go into a new life. You'll see how he does it in the book, uh, and deal only in cash.
That's getting harder to do,
It's
too.
harder to do. So he made him a shipbuilder who deals only in cash. Because if you start making interest, the IRS will track you down, even if you've disappeared into a small town. They will find you.
Yeah, but I mean, there are now places you go where you can't pay unless you have a credit card or you have
Yeah.
your phone enabled. So,
Right.
I mean, we're moving towards being a cashless society.
Yeah. And the penny's going to disappear. We know that.
Well, it does. So they cost much more to make than they're actually worth, right?
Right. Right.
And also, we need copper for other things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's a big thing in the paper or whatever is going on right now. Is copper mine in Arizona, isn't it? That's under some bitter discussion about pollution and other things that would result if they. I don't remember. Are they opening the mine or reactivating the mine? Does anybody remember? I saw it today in the Republic, and it just went right by me.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I can imagine they may actually call for pennies so they can melt them down and refine them.
Right. Right. So, yeah, we are increasingly cashless. It's harder and harder to disappear. But Paul manages to do it. And then he goes on the run and he's forced to go into the woods of New Hampshire, the White Mountains. And I found a couple of wilderness guides who took me out into the cold forest for a couple of days. And they told me how to make a fire, which is not rubbing two sticks together. That does not work. But with a flint and a knife, and you create sparks and you light up birch bark. I did it. I created a fire. I'm pretty good at it by now.
Awesome.
And they basically told me what kind of stuff would be in our hero's go bag. He's got a bag, knowing that at some point he's going to have to disappear.
You mean from the place he's already
From the
disappeared
bad guy.
to?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. The bad guys are going to catch up with him. So he's got a go bag set up. Unfortunately, he's in such a rush, he doesn't have a chance to check the go bag, and the lighter is out of gas. And the I forget what else, but the go bag is not very effective for him. So he's on the run, he's in the woods, and he's got to somehow get to Washington, D.C.
Why? Oh, you don't want to tell
I don't
us.
want that. I cannot.
Right.
I've already said too much. Yeah, you're forced to read the book. That's right.
There we are. So, without giving anything away, he is still married to the daughter while all this is going on.
The daughter of the oligarch. Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, you could have just called it the oligarch or the
I could-
oligarch's son-in-law or
Called the
whatever.
oligarch's son-in-law.
Yeah.
Exactly. Doesn't have the same ring to it.
No, not at all. So, it would be difficult to be the child of somebody like that.
Yeah, she's Tatiana, the oligarch's daughter, is an interesting character because she does not want to live with her parents' wealth. She lives as a photographer in New York in a kind of a crappy apartment. And when Paul meets her and starts going out with her, his friends caution him that she might be a gold digger. So then he realizes after they're involved, he realizes who her father is, and everything flips upside down.
So, what time frame do you have for this book? Can you tell us that?
What the
Well, I mean, he's in the woods. He's on whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. Is this a protracted living in the woods, or is it relatively
there's
compressed?
a lot of chapters in the woods. In fact, I initially planned to have one or two, and then it got more and more interesting to me. And
That's because you were making fires out of birch bark.
And damn it, I'm not going to waste that,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So there's a good sequence there, but there's also, by the way, a sequence in Moscow in the book. And I normally go wherever I write about. But in this case, I was told by the FBI not to go to Moscow because I'll tell you a quick story here, if I may. I was on Russian TV, RTTV, which was broadcast at the time live into Russia and around the world in English. I was talking about spies, and I started talking about how corrupt the Russian secret services are under Putin. And then how corrupt Putin was. And the anchor woman kept trying to cut me off. But I kept going. And eventually they ended the segment. So a few months later, I walk into my office, which is not in my home, it's across the street. I walk into my office, and I sit down at my computer, and my computer mouse is missing. And I thought, now that's weird. I wonder what happened to that. So I went to the other room to where my assistant has her computer to grab her mouse, and hers was missing too. And I thought, now what is going on here? This is very peculiar. And I noticed then that my backup drives were missing. And so I looked around the office. Nothing else was stolen except for these 2 computer mice and my backup drives. So I called a private eye friend of mine who's one of my sources. I said, could someone have gotten into my office? I mean, there are 2 locks on the doors. And he said, send me a picture of the locks, which I did. And he called me up 10 minutes later and said, I could pick those in about a minute and a half. And I said, but to get into the building that my office was in, you had to punch a code. And how could you get in if you didn't know the code? He said, send me a picture of that system. And I did. And about 10 minutes later, he emailed me the online manual for that system with the override code in it. So I called the source of mine who was in the FBI, and he came to my office, and the first thing he said when he sat down was, were you on Russian TV a while ago? I said, yeah. And he said, maybe not so bright. He said the Russians basically hire local talent, emigres, to do black bag jobs for them when they need them. In the US and in the UK, you don't hear about this, but it happens, and the FBI is aware of it. And so this is what happened to me. I had a black bag job done on me by the Russians.
Was there any other follow? I mean, that was it? They took your mice and they took your...
Yeah, well, and I said to the FBI guy, I understand why they took the backup drives. They want my files. I get that. But why do they take the mice? And he said, so you'd notice.
Oh, so it was a warning as well as...
No, there's a scene in The Oligarch's Daughter that's similar to that. I didn't waste that experience either.
How long ago was that?
That was about 10 years ago. Wow. Yeah. There has not been a break-in since, but I also have pick-proof locks on.
And you haven't been back to Moscow, presumably.
And thank you for bringing me back to what I was meant to say in the first place, which is that the FBI guy said, do not go to Moscow, because if you go, something will happen, and you'll be arrested like Evan Gershkovich was.
Yeah.
Only I don't have the Wall Street Journal behind me to back me up.
You might fall out a window.
I might fall out a window, that's right. Or be poisoned, yeah.
Yeah.
So I am not returning to Moscow.
Good point. But you have been there?
What's that?
Have you ever been
I
there?
have been there. Yeah, I was there
Right.
a number of times.
Okay.
So I wrote my Moscow sequence partly based on what I knew from visiting Moscow in the old days, and partly from doing research with Russians who live in Moscow today.
Okay.
It's easy to make phone calls these days and emails using WhatsApp.
So I've spent time in Russia, but the one place, oddly enough, I haven't been is to Moscow.
Moscow's
And I
interesting.
understand that the subway system in Moscow is a thing of wonder.
It is a beautiful subway system. It really is. It's fantastic. And the subway stations are beautiful as well.
Yeah.
It's a great system built by slave labor under Stalin.
And there's the Kremlin, of course.
And there's the Kremlin and the Kremlin museums, which are beautiful.
Hmm.
There's Lenin's mausoleum is still there, with the embalmed body of Lenin still lying. They haven't figured out what to do with him.
That seems to be a thing because I remember in Vietnam they have, what's his name?
Ho Chi Minh.
Ho Chi Minh. He's embalmed, and they have all the school classes take a field trip at one point and somewhere in the younger schools, and they all come to walk by
Really?
the tomb of Ho Chi Minh. And of course, you have, in China, you have wherever it is, Mao, right? And gradually disintegrating, I understand, inside
Yeah.
his tomb. What is it with these? I mean, it's almost like going back to the Egyptian days when, like, Ramesses II, was
Yeah.
entombed in his
Yeah.
sarcophagus.
Yeah, there's this. The totalitarian societies have this obsession, weirdly, with preserving the bodies of their founders.
Yeah.
But Putin's Russia is no longer a communist society. Lenin is not worshipped the way he was. Lenin is sort of out of place.
And Stalin's kind of brushed aside, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Although Putin admires Stalin and has said
Of course
so.
he does.
Of course he does, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Putin
So,
has been great for us thriller writers, by the way. He's a full employment act for thriller writers.
boy, you have lots of material to come, unquestionably, about
Yeah.
that. Speaking of books to come, what are you going to work on? You have written a few continuing characters, but you kind
Yeah.
of like writing.
I love writing standalones.
Yeah,
I do.
exactly.
But the next book I'm working on is a series, the beginning of a series.
A new series, not
A new
not
se-
one
a
we've
new
read.
series, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about it?
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is
Not
there
yet.
is there a reason that you decided to write a series again?
People love series. I know that. I mean, I get so many emails from writers saying, "When are you bringing back such and such a
Yeah.
character?" And I love series too. I love TV series, and I love novel series as well. So I've decided I'm going to give it a try again. Back to
Okay.
series.
Speaking of TV and film, have you had any interest in The Oligarch's Daughter
Yes.
that you can actually talk about as compared to an NDA, which is what you have to do most of the time?
Right. Well, I'm in a difficult position because they have not announced it yet.
Okay.
I think because of the fires in LA, the last guy hasn't signed his deal. But anyway, I have a terrific producer, which we will announce fairly shortly,
Oh, good.
and a really good showrunner, adapter for the series. And it's for a TV series based on the Oligarch's Daughter.
This is
Yeah.
so interesting. We've had 3 authors. Yeah.
Yeah. Just one, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
He said so you get some depth.
You get some depth. Instead of a 2-hour movie, you'll get maybe 8.
Listen, I love long form
Right.
television. There are a few books that really ought to be a movie. I mean, there are. I mean, there's mostly standalone books, and it's over when it's over, and the action scenes and all would be really lend themselves to it. But I love long form television.
It's great.
Yeah, we watch a lot of it. I'm tired at night. I've been reading all day and writing
Have
in
you
the
seen
whole
a
day.
series called Lioness, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's good. That's really good.
We've
There's
been
a lot of-
watching Cormoran's Strike again,
Cormoran's
the
Strike,
J.K.
yeah.
Rowling. Yeah, there's a new one, but then we recognized we'd missed the one before it, so it's
Yeah.
like Cormoran and Cormoran.
Yeah.
Vera is over, I'm sad to say, but and The Last Shetland I thought had a ludicrous plot, but there's from all over the world. It's not, you know, just,
Yeah,
but
not just the
interestingly
US.
enough, three of the last four authors that have been here have all got, they say, terrific movie deals in the work with great showrunners and John McMahon and James Byrne and now you. And so I think there's a lot of excitement again about, you know,
Yeah.
making books into film.
Yes. Yes, or TV.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah, definitely
Same
TV.
deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So, questions for Joe.
There must be
Lot-
questions here. Who
There
wants
must
to
be
start?
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you repeat the question for the camera when
Repeat
she
it?
asks?
Okay.
So with this, will you have some say in how your characters on the series develop?
In the TV series?
Yeah.
I don't know how much say I'm going to have. I had some input on the movie High Crimes with Morgan Freeman and Ashley Judd, and I had no input on the movie Paranoia with Harrison Ford and Gary Oldman, which is why that movie is not as good.
Definitely not as good.
No.
It certainly wasn't the actors, was it? No.
Yeah, the actors were fantastic, but the movie was not good. So the producer I've been talking to does want my input. So
And the script? Or on
I'm
the
not
casting
writing
or
the
what?
script. I'm not writing
No,
the
no,
script.
no. But I mean, you get to read it and offer notes.
Yeah, that I'll do. Yeah, I don't think I'll have any say in casting. I think that's sort of, I mean, that is their job after all. Yeah. So, I think so. Other questions? Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the Russia and Ukraine and the Ukraine war right now? Do you think that Russia's going to fade out Ukraine right now, or
Russia's going to do what?
they're going to fade out, right? Give up?
Fade out?
Yeah, fade out.
Oh, so what are my thoughts about Russia and Ukraine? Will Russia fade out? And the answer is no, I don't think so.
I don't think he can let that. It'd be too big a blow to his ego
He
and
can't
the
do that.
sacrifices that he's asked for. But we've kind of lost the moral high ground going after Greenland, not to mention Panama. So it kind of undercuts whatever, you know, we might have had in terms of Putin going after Russia
So no,
I mean- or Ukraine.
yeah. So I don't think Russia's going to fade. I think that I think there may be a ceasefire. That's the most we can hope for. And Russia will want to grab the territory that they've already grabbed. And Ukraine does not want to be forced into making a deal. So there will probably be a ceasefire, and that's the most we can hope for.
I have a comment, it's not a question. But I was thinking how when you're growing up, you have your dreams, but you have to have a facility for what you're ending up doing. You have to have a talent that is natural to you. And I knew Joe in high school, and I remember they announced over the speaker one day that Joe Finder got an 800 on the English SAT. And everybody, I mean, I know I was odd about that. I was really surprised. It was amazing to me. And to have that, you had that capability in you. You wanted to do something else for a while, but it's great that you went to what you're actually really good at. And you've been so successful. It's so nice to see.
Thank you, Barb. I love doing it. I feel so lucky being able to do it, to write for a living. Yeah.
What did you teach?
I taught writing. First, I taught history as a TA, and then I taught writing. I had written a nonfiction book that nobody bought about Dr. Armand Hammer. So I taught political writing to freshmen at Harvard. And I had some really nice students, actually, and some not nice students as well, actually.
I read because I suck at writing.
Do you have a couple of questions?
I do indeed, yeah. There are a couple people who have asked, have you had your home and your office swept for bugs?
Yes. Yes, I did. Didn't
That was
find
easy.
any, so.
Do you do it regularly, though?
No, I don't do it regularly. Maybe I should, but yeah.
Yeah, Wanda has a good comment. She says, High Crimes is one of the only books where the ending took me completely by surprise, and I had to turn back to page 1 and immediately start reading it again to see what clues I'd missed. Still love that book. The movie was nowhere near as good as the book.
But a good movie anyway, I thought. And you know I'm in it, right? Do you guys know that?
No, I didn't know
Yeah, there's a cameo. I have a cameo. I'm actually in 5 scenes, and so they flew me out. They made me a JAG officer, so I had to shave. They shaved my head, and they told me not to talk to the movie stars. That was the deal I made. Just don't tell anyone who you are. I said okay.
Give you your own director's chair
They did give me a director's chair.
with your
actually,
name on it?
With my name on it. Yeah.
Oh, so it was
Yeah.
hard to be anonymous if you were in the chair.
Well, but they gave it to me after I left the set. Yeah. Anyway, so at one point during the shoot, I saw Morgan Freeman standing over there talking to some other guy, and I decided I wanted to meet Morgan Freeman. What are they going to do? Yeah, right. What are they going to do, right? So I walked up to him and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Freeman, I just wanted to say hi. My name is Joe Finder. I wrote the book the movie's based on." And Morgan gave me this long, cold look. And he turned to the guy next to him and said, "So this gentleman here says he wrote the book the movie's based on, like I give a shit?" And the blood rushed to my head. And I thought, Morgan Freeman's an asshole? And then, right. And then he went, "Ha ha, I got you, didn't I?"
Thank you.
So he was great. He was a really nice guy.
You had us there for a moment, though. Anything else, Patrick?
Yeah.
Since you're starting a new series, does Nick Heller have a new book?
I don't. I will be going back to Nick Heller though,
Oh, good.
and we are actually negotiating a deal for a TV series based on Nick Heller. And then when that happens, publishers will suddenly be interested in publishing Nick Heller. So I get to write Nick again.
Where this is a publishing question. Where is your backlist, Nick Heller, at the moment?
It's at St. Martin's.
Okay, they still have it?
Yeah, and they're doing a good job with it.
Good.
Yeah.
So you can still read it.
Yeah. Other questions back there?
I have an online one.
Sure.
Stefania is joining us yet again, and she asks, or she just says, Mr. Fender has just received an enthusiastic review from Stephen King. Would like to know how he feels about that.
How I feel about that, yeah. I had no idea. We did not approach Stephen King. I don't really know Stephen King. We did not approach him for a blurb. My publisher sent him a copy of the book. I asked them to do that. And one Sunday morning, I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I get a text from my publicist saying, read what Stephen King just said on Twitter. And he said what he said on the cover of the book. And it blew me away. I had no idea. But Stephen King's a big fan of this book. And he, we've talked about Stephen King before. I mean, he's when he reads a book and he likes it, he really goes out on a limb.
And he obviously is a serious reader. I mean, he
Serious
makes time, despite his frequent output as a writer. He really is a reader. Yeah.
He reads a lot. He does. Yeah.
And he's very generous, too.
Very generous, and luckily he read Oligarch's Daughter.
Who are your favorite authors, Joe?
Well, there's a lot. I'm reading Megan Abbott right now,
The new one or the old
the
one?
new one,
Okay.
El Dorado Drive.
Mhm.
And I love Scott Turow. There's a long list of writers.
Have
that
you
I
read
really-
Presumed Guilty yet? Have you had time?
Which one?
Presumed Guilty is his new
No,
book.
I haven't read it. That's the next one I'm going to read.
It's absolutely terrific. I think of it as almost like it. I think of it as the great American novel for a whole lot of reasons. And I did the book lunch for Scott, a virtual book lunch. And if you're at all interested in it, you should go watch it, because we really talked about some interesting stuff. One of them was, could he have? He's in his late 70s. He and I are just a few years apart, and we grew up in the same place. We went to the same high school. We
Chicago,
both went
yeah.
to Stanford. Winnetka, actually. We both went to Detroit. We both went to Stanford, etc. And I asked him if he could have written Presumed Guilty before he got to this age. And of course, his answer was no, because it's very much a book of a man looking back on his life with all the mistakes and all the rest of it, but also trying to move forward with a new life. But what's really interesting to me is the way he writes about the Midwest, this mythical county that he has created that goes somewhere between Chicago and Wisconsin
Kendall
and over
County.
to Minnesota. Yeah, but the characters are not living in the urban part of Kendall County. They're up in, what do you call it? It starts with an SK, Skaggon or some such thing, a rural part.
Skaggion. or
Yeah,
something.
and anyway, it's an absolutely fabulous book. I was so
That's great
blown
to
away
hear.
by it. So you'll enjoy it when you
Yeah.
get to it. I'm selling another book while you're here. Sorry.
No, so Scott Turow, that's fine. I'm happy pushing Scott Turow.
Me too. Patrick, do you have another one?
Yeah, questions come in asking if you like Russian literature, and if yes, what in particular?
Do I like Russian literature? And I sure do. It is Russian literature that got me into Russia in the first place. My older sister was studying Russian, and she had on her bookshelf a book of stories by Nikolai Gogol. And I pulled it down. It was called The Nose. And it's this amazing and weird story written in the 19th century. And I loved the book. I loved the story. And I thought any culture that could produce a writer like that, I have to know more about. So I got into Russian literature through Gogol, then eventually Tolstoy and Chekhov and Dostoevsky and Pushkin and all those guys.
Was Gogol the Overcoat?
Yeah, he wrote The Overcoat.
Dead Souls.
And Dead Souls, yeah. I actually wrote a piece about this for Crime Reads, about Gogol's influence on American crime fiction.
And your conclusion was he was an noirist?
Yes. He had a great influence, partly through Dostoevsky, but Gogol's voice really made a difference.
He was a sparer writer, if I
Yes.
recall, than,
Than Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky tended to go on and on, whereas
Yes, that's right.
Gogol was, more concise.
Yeah.
Do you have to publish? Are you basically held to a schedule with the publishers that they want a book every 2 years, or?
My publisher now wants a book every 2 years, yeah. For a while I was doing a book a year. I couldn't do The Oligarch's Daughter in a year. It took me 2 years to write. It just, with the research and the two timelines and making sure that the scenes fit together, it took a lot. So basically every 2 years is the schedule now.
That's a fairly humane schedule.
It is humane.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Right. Did you have a question, sir? Lifelong friend?
Yeah, how did it feel to reach back in time to the red carpet and to the Moscow Club?
Yeah.
Did that feel foundational to you as you were approaching this book?
It did, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I had avoided writing about Russia for years. And I also sort of felt that there were writers who do Russia is the bad guy. And I didn't want to do that same old thing that all other writers were doing in thrillerdom. So it was when I got the idea for The Oligarch's Daughter that I thought, I can go back to this now. And it felt great. It was just like slipping into a great pair of shoes that you've worn before, you know?
I look forward to reading it even more now.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful book. You really will enjoy it very much. And
Of course.
anybody else have a question? Chris, don't just sit there.
Yep.
You already did, huh? All right. Chris is visiting us from Iowa on his book junkie. Yep. We get to see Chris practically every day for like 3 months, and then he goes away, and we miss him.
Great place to be.
But not in February, as compared to Phoenix. She says, having grown up in the Midwest. Right.
15 below and 6 inches of snow, and by the time I get back, it won't be there.
Right. Very
Got
nice.
you. All right. So, do you have any questions for the audience?
I do not. Buy a book.
Right. Okay. Well, at this point, oh, good. There's another book coming. I have a book I thought that I might give away, actually. What did I do with it? This is a book that I have, to be honest, I have mixed feelings about. And the reason I say that is that it's a little dark here and there, but I don't know if any of you have run across this is a trilogy by an author named Bradford Morrow. And it's about book forging. So, any of you read John Dunning? Did any of you remember the Book to Die and the sequence of books that John Dunning wrote about? Well, when he wrote Book to Die, it sent people all over the United States to their bookcases to check out whether
First edition.
yeah, and whether books were signed. He wrote some wonderful books, and then he was felled by a brain tumor, which I thought was incredibly sad because he was a lovely guy and so talented. But anyway, Bradford has written 3 books about forgeries, and this one, the forgery in question is Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, so it's really quite interesting. And he signed copies for us, which we have here still. But I thought this was a neat book to give away in a night we're talking a bit about literary things. So do you have numbers in your books? All right, so what is it? I think 9. So you want to pick a number between 1 and 9?
6.
Oh, look, it's you. Oh, good, a faithful attendee. So, right. So I'm going to hand this one over to you, if I can do that. You're welcome. Right, so let's give Joe a round of applause. It's so great to have him here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.
And if you all would like to fold your shelves and move them over, chairs, move them over to that wall and then come and talk to Joe and get pictures taken and get your book signed, that'd be great. Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks,
Thank you.
virtual audience.
Thank you for having me, Barbara. Appreciate it.